So my name is Joshua Setti. I'm from Opaskwack Cree Nation. I'm an Indigenous filmmaker.
Yeah, I'm Ananda, Canadian Decho Dene from the Agoti First Nation of Northwest Territories.
I'm Scarlet Sparrow Felix. I'm from the Musqueam First Nations.
And I'm in my fourth year of the MOPA program.
I actually went to school here and I graduated a couple of years ago. The program I took was the Indigenous Film Program.
I am in fourth year of MOPA right now.
Well, Indigenous power.
Being Indigenous and working in creative spaces can be very, it can be difficult at times. When I tell people I am, their demeanor kind of changes a little bit. Part of Indigenous power, I feel like, is leadership. Whether I'm working on a film set or I'm working at a day job or I'm working at a gig, it's good to kind of take a lead and, kind of guide people.
I think it more so means like who you are and how you recognize that within yourself and how you carry yourself in your daily life. Being in like these colonial institutions and these majority white occupied spaces, it's for me to like remember who I am and who I come from, and to understand the fact that, as cheesy as this sounds, like our ancestors literally fought for us to be here. So I don't really take anything of that for granted, and I'm always reminded of that in my work.
For me personally, I don't know if I see like in my daily life red power as like a political statement or movement, but I see it in being surrounded by like the Musqueam community every day. In a film context, I want to like change the narrative on Indigenous filmmaking. A lot of them are about like residential school and like narratives like that. People need to be exposed to that, but I also think that people should be exposed to like a full breadth of Indigenous film and like being able to see that like we're not only people who have experienced trauma, but like also are funny, and like well-rounded human beings.
Probably one of the best examples of Indigenous power in filmmaking today would be, as like a person, would be Marie Clements. She is an amazing director. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with her on a project briefly this past summer. It was insane to see, because it was worked very different than a normal set, because during setup we actually had like a whole bunch of music going, and everyone was just working together, and it was just very like, I don't know how to describe it, almost soothing and peaceful. And the movie she makes, like Bones of Crows, is just phenomenal. It's like it's peak Indigenous like culture and power all into filmmaking.
Well, I think a lot of the stories right now are very focused on it's spreading more from what we call trauma porn, because a lot of it has to do with like residential school, the 60s scoop. Not a bad thing at all, but I think for a lot of us younger generation that we've been through and we've lived it, we're now seeing a lot of stories of hope and faith, and a lot of stories focusing and exploring Indigenous futurism, which is pretty cool.
I've been to Indigenous film festivals where like not only Indigenous people are attending, and it is like a way of education for these people, and like that's how I see it, and that's how like some of my peers see it.
Well, I've been told I'm pretty resilient these days. It's a very common thing for those of us who are told that it's getting really tiring because we don't want to be resilient all the time. We want to be soft and be able to laugh and enjoy each other's company. But I guess for me and my community, it's the fact that like we're still here, and I never really saw myself going to university. But then here I am, like many years later in my final year of university. So I guess for me, resilience is just being stubborn.
I think right now resilience should probably be rephrased as reconciliation. I worked for the band office in one of their companies, and I got to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, big deals with like the city of Vancouver and all that, to like public art like everywhere across the city, showing that like we're still here and this is actually still our land.
Forcing a way into getting filmmaking positions, into key creative roles. We have to try and get our ways into those roles, and I think that's a form of resilience, because it shows that we've struggled to break into this industry for a long time, and now that we're actually showing up and saying, hey, we're here, we're alive, and we want to tell our stories.
I think working with family and working with loved ones is like the thing that I want to do. For our short this summer, it was obviously like a community film because we shot it in my aunt's house on Musqueam. We had community members as extras helping with the catering and everything. Those community members were not people who are in film. The Musqueam community, like coming together and like helping my cousin and I make this film and being a part of it was really big for me.
This past summer, a lot of the work that I did was focused on my culture and my community, giving back in that way, because a lot of people where I come from don't have the education or the capability to do the work that is much needed, like documentation and preservation of the culture and the language and the practices. I'm always keeping in mind of where I come from and who I come from and keeping those values close to me.
Growing up in Winnipeg it was very cool, I guess. I think actually it's the largest urban native population. It kind of shaped how I worked because I was able to, interact with other Indigenous creators and storytellers. And so from a very young age, I was actually able to learn storytelling and, speak with other Indigenous creators who were kind of like the precursor to me.
A lot of the truths that I've explored is like very difficult topics. Domestic violence, drug dealing, and bootlegging. We talk about very hard topics, but through it all, like us, the younger generation who are doing these stories, yes, we want to explore outside of that, but I think in order for it to get there, we have to start exploring these within ourselves through our films.
Resistance, resilience, actively just living. I think that's something that I personally would like to tell, and I do actively try and tell my stories.
For me personally, what I want to do is show that, like, we're people too, and we're not just a stereotype. We're not just our trauma. We're not just some guy, like, looking out onto the horizon in the desert, you know?
A lot of it comes from my grandparents, actually.
My grandpa.
I also think about my grandma.
Like, everything that I know today comes from my grandparents and from my family in general. So whenever I'm like, this is really hard, I don't want to do this anymore, I just think of them and I'm like, okay, I have to remember why I'm here.
She's a fine artist. She does weaving, and she has blankets and murals and, like, sculptures all across Vancouver and all across the world. She is someone that I look up to in my art because she's, like, someone who revived a style of Indigenous art. But my grandma is also still a part of the community, where she works at community events. She works at the community center just because she loves it, even though she doesn't have to.
My grandpa had this huge collection of VHS movies, and he would always talk about movies and stuff, and it just kind of like shaped how I want to be and like what kind of movies I want to make. And I had like such authentic moments with my grandpa, and him just talking about filmmaking was so cool.
I'm still navigating that, being one of the few Indigenous students and creatives here in the MOPA program. A lot of it has to do with sticking true to who I am and where I come from, the values, but also knowing the fact that I am not the only one that has been through this. And there's like previous people and also within my cohort with my other IDF transfer. Yeah, just keep in mind that why I'm here. And also when it gets really hard, I just go to my friends or my family and just talk to them about it, and it helps a lot.
There's been times where I said I was Indigenous, and it was really weird because then like another person was just like, "Oh, I'm Indigenous too," and then it was like, "Okay, that's cool." But then they started going off and like, then they started saying like slurs, and then they started saying like drinking stereotypes and all that, and it's just like, okay, I don't want to act like this. Disheartening to see that someone I feel like they got broke by the system a little bit, and they kind of just accepted racism and everything in their set. And in their daily life, and like they started calling themselves slurs and like degrading themselves. That's awful, actually, I think. And so when I'm on a set, I want to uplift other Indigenous people that I'm around and be collaborative. And that's one of the bigger differences between like a union set versus an Indigenous set. I think there's just more room for collaboration and more creative ideas in an Indigenous film set than a regular indie set. When I'm not working on film sets, usually I'm working at a day job. And the day job I have, I really like, and I find it really peaceful and very soothing because it's a lot less chaotic than a film set, and it feels very grounding. Life can't always be filmmaking, I feel like. Otherwise, you're just going to get burnt out, and it's going to be bad. Whether it's a day job, whether it's going out for a night of fun, whether it's sitting in a room playing games, or just, writing a diary. I think that self-care is very important.
Try to rest a lot, or I go for walks in the forest, or I'd go like get a coffee with a friend, and yeah, a lot of rest and a lot of talking with friends because that helps a lot. I've always been a supporter of other Indigenous creatives, so whenever they reach out to me if I want to help them on like a short film or a short doc, I always say yes if I have the time for it. And I suppose building capacity in that way and giving room for others who don't really have the opportunity. Like within this short film that I'm producing next semester, we are making sure that people who want the roles who didn't get in the first time get it this time. So building capacity, definitely.
I like to hire Indigenous people. And I've had issues in the past where I've been brought onto a set with the purpose of filling a role of being a Indigenous person on set through DEI programs, and I think that's it's okay, but it feels demeaning at the same time. When I get brought on sets as more like a key creative role, bring on Indigenous people as well. I try to hire only Indigenous people. The director initially told me that they want to hire Indigenous people, and then I get told it's like, oh, but I have this person now, and they're non-Indigenous, and it's just like, well, you brought me on to bring more Indigenous crew, so like, why bring me on if you're just not gonna listen to my suggestions? Because they bring them on because they have more experience, and it's just like, okay, but that may be true, but at the same time, they need experience, otherwise they're not going to get it if things like this keep happening. And I do get that, it should be the best of the best, but when we don't hire Indigenous people, they can't get better. Ooh, so many things. I like the way that's going right now. Feels like we have a really large like uptick of Indigenous creators coming into the industry. So in the next 10-15 years, I think we're going to see enough where it's just like we can have like 4 or 5 different crews happening in Vancouver of Indigenous filmmakers, which is what I'm excited to see. Oh, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I want to see fantasy stuff, like hands down. Sci-fi too, so like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, big things like that. I want to see Indigenous versions of that, but I don't want to see like Indigenous person play Gandalf. I want to see us create our own fantasy story and our own culture and root it in that in those fantasy films. Something I really want to see, and I'm also trying to do that. So that's my own personal projects as well. But I want to see more of it.
I think like right now, a lot of capacity building because I work with individuals who don't understand or weren't even aware of their own behavior until afterwards, which is like completely understandable. But I think going into it, if you're going to be like in the industry, to build capacity to understand your fellow, I guess, Indigenous colleagues on the film.
I find a lot of the DEI programs, they're just meant to fill in a person. Like, oh, this person's Indigenous, this person's person of color, this person's this thing to fill in this slot. But when I do get those positions or when I do get something like that, it doesn't feel sincere. I think they have to kind of fix that a little bit. I don't know how they're going to fix it. Don't have an idea for that one. But programs where there's equity streams, I want it to feel more sincere. Resistance against colonial systems, and with the resistance comes creativity. And I think that's where power comes from. It's creativity.
I guess I'm just really grateful to be included and grateful to be part of a greater collective of Indigenous creatives, and never thought I'd see myself there, but I'm one of the few that are in it. Yeah, masicho.